Once a successful trial lawyer, he decides to turn his practice into animal law, falling in love with a horse named Alydar when he once worked at a horse racing track in Nebraska. He starts to investigate what happens to him. The things that he finds out about the equestrian world can be shocking. So shocking that he wrote an excellent book about it. Join me as I talk to author Fred M. Kray on this episode of True Crime and Authors.
Welcome to True Crime and Authors Podcast, where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction. Here's your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another edition of True Crime and Authors. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure you join us on all of our social medias. One link to a link tree will get you all of the links you need to have for the show. Today, I have a good one for you. This person falls up underneath an extraordinary person as well as an author. So let me introduce to you who we have today. He is a civil trial attorney who for the last 20 years has limited his practice to animal law. Whether rescuing a stolen Great Dane with a SWAT team or freeing innocent dogs from death row, it has always been his life's purpose to give animals a voice. He was introduced to horse racing working at a racetrack in Nebraska while attending law school. He fell in love with a horse named Alydar in Miami, watching him run in the Flamingo Stakes in the Florida Derby. Reintroduced to Alydar's story when he moved to Gainesville, he spent 4 years researching, interviewing, and writing about Alydar, producing a story that celebrates the horse's legacy while at the same time exposing the greed and corruption behind the gates of Calumet. He is the author of the new book, Broken, The Suspicious Death of Alydar and the End of Horse Racing's Golden Age. Please welcome to the show, author Fred M. Kray. Hey, Fred, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and I'm great. I'm really happy to be on your show, especially since it has to do with true crime, which my book is.
Well, let me say, first of all, I never give people dates, but this is an important one. Happy Pub Day to you. Today is May 2nd. Your book just dropped. So I want to say congratulations on that.
And I really appreciate that. I started writing this book in 2018, and it's now 2023. So you can imagine the long and winding road to the publication of this book.
So very interesting book, interesting choices you made in your career. So let's kind of jump into it. What made you decide to limit your practice and go into animal law?
I got burnt out of trial law. Trial law is a very intense and really life-sucking sort of profession because you have to get everything right. There's no second chance. You've got the judge there. You've got the jury there. You've got your opponents there. I didn't ever sleep when I had a trial. It was a week long. I wouldn't sleep for a week. And when I got to be in my 40s, my body just said, hey, you can't do this anymore. So I really just quit. I burned out and I said, I can't do this anymore. You know, people say, wow, you're really brave. It was really like you feel like you were on the edge of a building getting ready to jump off and your only choice was to quit in order to save yourself. So I quit. I really didn't do much for a couple of years, tried to do other things. And what happened was an incident. An incident happened when my dog, I got a notice in the mail that my dog wasn't licensed and I had to have a trial about it. And I thought, okay, I'm a trial lawyer. I'll go down there. So I go down there and, the guy from the county is there and he says, you need to have a license for your dog. But my dog had died before the license was due. So I brought the cremains of my dog and put them on the desk and said, here are the cremains of my dog. He was dead before the license was due. And the judge turned to the guy and he said, he's got you there. And the whole crowd in the audience laughed and applauded. And the guy from the county was livid. He said, we're going to appeal. And he took the cremains and he went to copy them. And, I was a trial lawyer. So I said to the judge, I said, listen, I'm a trial lawyer. there's nothing to appeal. This guy's reading off his computer. He doesn't have personal knowledge of anything. Why would the county waste their time and money to appeal this? And the judge said to me, well, they're not going to appeal. He's just mad because he lost. And I went home that day and I thought to myself, this is no way to run animal control. Animal control is supposed to be for the animals, And I thought to myself, I could do this. I could represent animals, people that were put in these situations, and do some good and help animals that don't have a voice. And so that was the day I decided to start my animal law career. And it really saved my mental health because it gave me something I could do and do well. And it took me out of this depression I was in that was really severe.
So since you started advocating for animals, what kind of things have you seen out there? I mean, one case that comes to mind, I'm sure everybody knows, it's been years ago, was the Michael Vick case. Very, very widely published. Did you advocate for things like that, or what kind of things did you see out in the field?
Animal law is a very broad area. I know the people who were involved in the Vick case. Rebecca Huss was the special master. And I will say this about this Michael Vick's case. Michael Vick unintentionally did more for fighting dogs than any other person alive, because the fact that his dogs were able to be rehabilitated and put into homes changed the whole context of what happens to dogs when they fight. Before his case, every fighting dog was euthanized. After his case, people tried to determine whether a fighting dog could be rehabilitated. And laws changed, and it wasn't his intent, but it really shifted the welfare of fighting dogs. And to answer your question a little bit more broadly, animal law is a very wide thing. It goes anywhere from saving a dog that's been wrongly accused of being dangerous. It goes to who gets the dog when people get divorced. It goes to you buy a puppy from a puppy place and it's defective. It has a heart murmur, and you want to give it back, but you also want to have it, have the surgery, and there's litigation about that. There's also the issue of pit bulls being identified by some guy looking at them and saying, "Hey, you got a pit bull. We're either going to take it away from you or you have to give it away to someone else." And I actually went to federal court about that because the science really is that identifying a pit bull by looking at it is junk science. There's no way to replicate it. It's not accurate. And interestingly enough, Miami, which was one of the last places to have a pit bull ban, overturned theirs in the last couple weeks, which I had tried for many years to get it overturned. But these are all things. The funniest case I had, and you read it at the beginning, was I had to get a SWAT team to go out and reclaim a stolen Great Dane. And you think to yourself, how does this happen? What happened was the dog got loose. He was out. He was taken by animal control. And after 7 days, animal control has the right to takes the title to that dog and has the right to give it to a rescue. And that rescue was Great Dane Rescue. And so they took the dog, put it in had it in quarantine at a vet. And the original owner went there and stole it and then hid it. And so they hired me to get the dog back. And of course, what I didn't understand and now know is that if you're going to break into somebody's house to take a dog back, you need to hire special police that know how to use deadly force, because somebody can come to the door and say, "I'm not letting you in." And if you have a search warrant, you're allowed to go in there and break the door down and do all this. A person could get out their gun and say, "I'm not." So, you have to hire special policemen, which cost like $5,000, because you can't just get the run of the mill guy. And this was very exciting. They had a staging area with 4 police cars. I had to be there to identify the Great Dane because you got to get the right one. And so we were in the staging area, and we went to this guy's house with 4 police cars. All their sirens are on. The guy's he's got a fenced in area with a keypad, and the cops get the guy to come out, and he comes out and he says, "What's this all about?" Now, all the cops are out there and all their police car sirens are on. Now all the neighbors are walking out. It's really a scene. And you think, animal law is boring. No, it's not. So the guy comes out and he says, what's this all about? And the policeman says, look, we have a search warrant for this Great Dane. And the guy says, there's no Great Dane here. And the policeman says to him, well, I understand that you would say that, but you have to understand that we have a search warrant and we are not going to take your word for it. Now, look, and this guy who's telling him this is like Sylvester Stallone. He's got big muscles. He's bald headed, his bulging out, and he's got, all these people around. And he says, we can do this the easy or the hard way. You can either tell me he's not here and we'll take this battering ram and break down your doors and all your house looking for it, or you can just bring the dog out. It's up to you. What do you think he did?
Brought the dog out.
Yes. So they were very experienced. So these are the kind of things, another thing that happened while is that we found out that this place that sold dogs stole the veterinarian who was supposed to examine them's signature stamp. And instead of him examining, just stamped his name on the piece of paper that you have to sell a dog. And so we took this guy's deposition and I said, well, how many dogs have you examined? And he said, here's a pile of the dogs I've examined. And I said, well, here's the ones with your signature. And it's twice as big, as the pile that he has. I said, so what do you think happened? He said, well, I think that they stole my signature stamp. I said, well, that's not a very good thing, is it? He said, no. I said, and you wouldn't let them do that on purpose. So, he denied it. But so now half those dogs that got sold were never seen by a vet, and that's illegal in Florida. So these are the kind of cases you get, and it's never boring. It's always exciting, and your client is always innocent.
Well, thank you for that, because you must have been reading my mind, because that was actually my next question was, did you really take a SWAT team to get a Great Dane? Because I've never heard of that before. So that's an excellent story. Didn't even know there were special police that did things of that nature.
Well, you can understand why with all the things that we've heard lately.
Absolutely.
People going in and shooting and, not announcing themselves. No, I think that's a good system.
So can you tell us what it's like to work at a horse race track, and how did you actually get the job to do that?
I was in law school and a friend of mine said, hey, the track is coming. This was in Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't know why I went to Lincoln, Nebraska for law school. I went to school in Pennsylvania. That's another story. But I was working there in the summer, and a friend of mine said, hey, you can work at the track. So I went to the track and I worked as a pari-mutuel agent, which basically is somebody who takes your bets and pays you the money. Now, back then, this wasn't electronic. You took a ticket, you looked at his thing, you counted out the money and gave it back. So I worked there in the summer for 3 years. And while I was there, I got to meet all the people. When you go to a horse race, you see 2 minutes of horses, racing as fast as they can. But those horses are supported by an entire, what they call the backside of racing, which is the trainers, the hot walkers, the grooms, the exercise riders. And it's a whole nother world. If you go to the Kentucky Derby, there's a whole side of the track, and it's peopled with all of the people that take care of the horses. And at Churchill Downs, they actually have dorms. They have a medical place. They've tried very hard to help those people live a more middle-class lifestyle than they otherwise would, because, you can't make a lot of money grooming a horse. So I met a lot of these people, and inevitably what happens is you get into horse racing because, the groom will come and say, hey, I got a hot tip. I watched so-and-so race, running this morning. It was really good. You should bet on it, So, and so you meet all the people and you meet the horses. And what you find is all the horses have different personalities. I mean, if you have pets, you already know this. But for some reason, I didn't really realize it, and I've always had a dog of some kind. You have horses that are really mellow. You have horses that are really nervous. You've got horses that are really dangerous. You've got horses that they're described as man eaters. I mean, they may be great racing stallions, but they're hard to handle. If they have a chance, they'll bite you and bite you bad. I just got interested in it because of that, meeting all the people and talking to them every day, and getting hot tips. And, I would go over to the barns and go into the barns and look in and, give them carrots and, talk to them. And I felt like there was something special about horses. First of all, because there's an evolutionary link to man and horses. You know, when you think about horses, you think about they've plowed our fields, they've ridden us on our back, they've died in battles they knew nothing about, and there's this quiet aura about horses that's they have a gravitas, and you just feel like they have a lot of wisdom and they're noble. And I think a lot of people are drawn to them because if you've grown up in an environment where there's drama, you know, a lot of fiery tempers and all that, a horse is a very relaxing, very quiet presence that you can feel relaxed around. I've asked a lot of people, you know, what it is about horses, and some of the people say, you know, what the horse will do for you when he trusts you. So these are the things that that stuck with me, and the thing that stuck me was their majesty in running. You know, when you see them in the stretch running, and you see them giving it everything they've got, and you see the musculature, and you hear the rhythm of their hoofs beat and their breath coming out. I mean, it's a magical thing, and I don't know that you can really, if you've never experienced it, I think you can't. A description won't do it for you, but for me, it's a magical moment, and no matter how many times I see it, it's almost religious.
Horses is definitely part of our nature and things that we love. Clydesdales is the most popular horses ever from Budweiser. And it's just amazing to me. Like my whole family, I think they did a commercial of the Super Bowl, and my wife was doing something in the kitchen. Oh my God, the Clydesdales is on. They've actually brought them down here. I've actually passed by the Clydesdales trailer going through California. And just the prestige of the horses, the way they look. I agree with you. You can't get a more beautiful animal than a horse, especially if the horse is taken care of properly.
And those Clydesdales are huge.
Yeah. So then you met Alydar. How did you come to meet Alydar, and what about this particular horse was so special to you?
I was in my trial phase as a lawyer back in '78. I was a pretty green lawyer, and you get you know, so wrapped up in that you have no life. I mean, so one day I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go to the races, and so you know, I went down to there are a lot of tracks in Miami. Some of them have closed since, but you know, I went to watch Alydar at the Flamingo Stakes in March of '78, and he's a big horse, and his style of running is in itself exciting because he's a horse that runs from the rear. In other words, he doesn't go out to the front and stay in front the whole time. What he does is he waits until the stretch run, and then he just outruns everybody. In that sense, he's not a very versatile horse like Affirmed was. But Alydar was a strong horse. I saw him run in the Flamingo Stakes at Hialeah Park, and I just fell in love with him. It was his nobility and his determination. You could just see as he coming to pass the horses in the stretch, just how determined he was to win. And you thought to yourself, that is that crystallizes competition in a way that is like Michael Jordan. I mean, or like anyone else who is the biggest competitor you've ever seen. And I was so impressed. And I don't know it's another thing, you know, you're a fan and you're, you know, one of 20,000 in the audience, but I felt like I knew him. I felt we had a bond that is not explainable. And as a result of that, I knew he was going to run a month later in the Florida Derby, and I went and saw him there, and the same thing. And I just, you know, everybody has one horse they love. Alydar was that for me. And then I went back to work, and I kind of, you know, I followed him in the Triple Crown. I followed him in the Travers. And then, you know, I sort of lost track of it. And after, you know, I came up to Gainesville and started practicing animal law. I got back into horse racing a little bit because Ocala is right next to Gainesville. And Ocala is the second horse capital of the world. And one day I decided I wanted to go and find Dr. Fager's headstone. Dr. Fager is probably the fastest horse that ever ran back in those days. And he was named after a Dr. Fager because the neurologist who saved the trainer's life was named Dr. Fager. And he said, I'm going to name a horse after you. So his headstone is Ocala. And so I decided to take a horse farm tour to find it. And when I was on the horse farm tour, I was talking to this lady, and she said, what's your favorite horse? I said, Alydar. She said, oh, well, there's a lady here who was at Calumet Farm when Alydar was there. And I said, oh, great. So I said, I'd like to talk to her. So I went to talk to her. I said, listen, were you at Calumet when Alydar was there? She said, yes. I said, well, what happened to him? And she said, everybody on the farm knows what happened to him. You couldn't get within 50 feet of that barn without 3 guys coming out. They had security. I said, well, do you think J.T. Lundy killed Alydar? And she said, no, I think he aligned it. I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about it. And she said, I won't talk to you about it because I'm afraid for my family and for my children. Now, this is, we're talking about now, it's 2018, and he died in 1990. And I'm thinking, how is this possible that this woman is here and she's that afraid, And I had read Wild Ride, which is a book about Calumet, and there were some inferences in that book that the mafia might have been involved. And I was thinking of that scene in The Godfather where the guy wakes up with a bloody horse head in his bed, and I thought, so the lady would not talk to me. I said, listen, I like this. She said, no, I'm not talking to you. She left. So with that introduction into Alydar's situation, I went home and I started reading everything there was. And I found out that there had been an FBI investigation and 2 trials about Alydar. And so I flew to Houston and got all the court transcripts. I read them and I thought, I don't understand how this accident, quote unquote, happened. And so I decided, mainly from my own curiosity, because, I thought to myself, look, you've never written a book before. You don't have any connections in horse racing. There's been 2 trials. How could I possibly find out anything new? But I decided, hey, I'm going to talk to some people and see. So I started interviewing. I ended up interviewing 25 people, which included the grooms, the farm hands, the guys who investigated it for the insurance companies, the FBI agent. And after I did all that, I thought, you know what? This is a book. And that's how I wrote the book.
Just let the audience know, I will happily link it down here, but there is a whole entire Wikipedia page just on Alydar, along with a whole lot of other articles I have seen. But your book is the most comprehensive of all of those.
Yeah, you also have to go to my website because my website is the most comprehensive about information. On my website is meant to be used in conjunction with the book, so that if you go on my website, you'll see the pictures that the insurance adjuster took the night of the incident, which those pictures are very important because that allows you to see what he saw. It's not like, hey, I'm saying this doesn't look possible. You can look at the pictures that he took that night and all of his reports. And you can see the stallion barn where it happened. And if you're an Alydar fan, you can see all of his races, all of his trophies, his racing career. And so as you go through the book and read it, and I say, well, Tom Dixon wrote this report, you can go see the report. You can go on my website and say, I don't want to believe what Mr. Kray is saying. I want to see for myself. And you can read all of his reports that led to Lloyds of London paying $36.5 million in 30 days. I mean, that struck me as wild in the first place. That, I've had cases for, $5,000 that had more investigation than this case with Alydar. So, all those things. And the thing is, after the insurance company paid, it was essentially over with. People said, okay, well, that's what the insurance company is not going to pay. A total between the two of $40.5 million and not have done a good investigation. But that's really not the case. I'll give you 2 things to whet your appetite about why, when I started investigating this, I didn't think it was an accident. The first is, and this was known when the insurance company did their investigation, although they didn't report on it. A week before Alydar died, somebody in the Calumet Crown Vic came up to the regular night watchman and said, hey, now this is court testimony. This isn't me talking. This is what was testified to by the people who were involved in court. So Cowboy Kip was the regular night watchman. A week before this incident, somebody in the Calumet vehicle came up and said, "Hey, Cowboy, we're worried you're burning out. You need to take a night off." And he said, "Listen, I never take a night off. I'm not interested in taking a night off. I like my job. I've already taken my vacation. I don't really need a night off. What's all this burning out? I've been working here for, 5 years and you've never asked me this before." And so that person said to him, "Look, we want you to take the night off." And he took that as, take the night off and shut up. So he said, "Okay." And he said, "Okay, well, I'll take the night off. What night do you want me to take off?" And they said, "Tuesday night." Now, that means that a substitute night watchman, who was Alton Stone, replaced him on that night. And that's the night that Alydar was injured. The second thing that will give you a taste of why I didn't think it was an accident was, okay, you have an accident on November 13th. An insurance adjuster goes out and take pictures that night. Well, the second insurance company adjuster for Golden Eagle, Lloyds was the 36.5, and Golden Eagle had 5. So the insurance adjuster for Golden Eagle calls the morning after at 9:00 and says, "Look, I want to come over and take pictures of the stall and talk to everybody involved." And so they say, "Well, you're not allowed to come." And he says, "What? I'm the adjuster." And they said, "Well, we're not letting you on." So he goes back and calls his boss, and his boss calls Calumet and says, "Listen, we've got a $5 million policy, and if you have to cooperate under the insurance policy, and if you don't let us in, we're not going to pay." So they say, "Okay, we'll let him in." So the guy from Golden Eagle, Terry McVeigh is his name, goes over there the day after the incident, and they let him in, and he goes to look at the stall, and it's been repaired. And everything all the bolts that have been broken off, and they're gone. And Terry McVeigh says, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, we fixed it." And so the question is, why wouldn't they let him in at 9:00? Because they were fixing it. And how do I know that? Because the guy who fixed it testified in trial that at 9:00 that morning, Calumet management told him, and he's the maintenance guy, "We want that fixed now." Now here we have, think about it, we have a $40.5 million insurance claim, and you're fixing the evidence so that it can't be, it's not there. It's not like Calumet never had an insurance claim and didn't know. So these two facts alone are enough to start to raise questions.
Wow. So I guess the question I have too is, as you said earlier, the lady you spoke to didn't want to speak about it because she was afraid for her life. If there's other people that's afraid of their life, what made you go ahead with the investigation and want to write the book?
Well, because I thought, as I investigated, I first investigated the mafia angle. And after I investigated, it was my conclusion. And after I talked to the FBI agent, I didn't think that mafia had anything to do with it. While it's clear that Calumet Farm did business with a farm in Ocala that was run by some mafia people, I think the mafia didn't have anything. So I wasn't afraid of that, really. I'll tell you what I was afraid of. This is kind of the comic relief in the book. So one of the guys who came to see Alydar after the injury, his name was Keith Hiley. And so I wanted to interview him, and I went on his Facebook page, and he was a survivalist. He had, gun rights, gun ownership. And so I was afraid to go interview him in his small town in Kentucky because I was afraid maybe, he was armed. So I called a private investigator and I said, "Listen, I want somebody to go with me with this guy. You're a private investigator. You can bring a gun, and I don't want to be, I don't know. I mean, I want to have some protection." And, me, city slicker, going into a small town in Kentucky, it's a small town. You're in there 5 seconds and everybody knows you're there. Things get around in a small town. So I go pick up the private investigator. We're on the way to interview this guy. And I say to the guy, "Did you bring your gun?" And he goes, "No." And, I'm in the car with him, and I'm thinking to myself, do I still want to go through with this? And like we're halfway there. So I think, well, we're going to go through with it. And it turned out we couldn't find him. He wouldn't answer the phone. He wouldn't let us in. So it turned out to be nothing. But it was a funny moment at the time. It was not funny. I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny now.
So part of your book, you said that you are exposing the greed and corruption behind the gates of Calumet. Those who know horse racing knows Calumet very well. Does this thing go deeper beyond Alydar? Is these things that happens all the time that we just don't see?
Well, there's a lot of corruption in horse racing. I think anytime you have money and people, you have corruption. I mean, I don't think it's just in horse racing, but one interview that I had, my very first interview that I had was in Lexington on a radio show. The guy who runs it, his name was Urkel Eccles. He started out the interview saying to me, your book is about horses being killed for the insurance money. And I said, look, I don't want to start out the interview like that. And he looked me dead in the face and he said, well, you wrote about it, so you might as well talk about it. The book isn't all about that, but there are 3 pages in the book where I catalog all of the ways that horses have been killed for the insurance money. It's terrible. And one of the people I interview for this book is named Tommy Burns, and he killed 15 horses for the insurance money in the equestrian world. It's done. And it can be done for $5,000, and your horse could be worth $25,000. It's mind-boggling that, at least for Tommy Burns, the people that were having their equestrian horses killed were, in many cases, millionaires. And they didn't need the money. What was found out after this, go back and say, at the time Alydar was injured, nobody knew except the insiders, like the people who managed Calumet, that Calumet was in debt, terrible, terrible debt, that they were not going to get out of. And if you look at the financial situation, none of it came out. When the insurance companies did their thing and paid their money, they had no idea about Calumet's financial situation. It wasn't until Calumet declared bankruptcy and people got access to Calumet's records. And when John Ward took over, the Calumet after J.T. Lundy left, he found out there were $120 million in debt. Alydar's money, $40.5 million, was not going to save them, but it would pay off maybe 80% of their loan to First City National Bank of Houston. So when the FBI got involved after this, they brought all this to light, all this financial stuff. When that bank, First City National Bank, went out of business, the FDIC took over. They started finding out that Alydar was collateral for too many loans, and that all the loans of First City went bad. And so that's when they started to investigate what happened to Alydar. And so that's when they started talking to people. And the first person they talked to was Alton Stone, who was the night watchman, the substitute night watchman. And he made some statements that were inconsistent in front of the grand jury, so they arrested him for lying to the grand jury. And their hope was that he would turn on Lundy and give them information so that they could prove that Lundy did it. Unfortunately, he didn't know anything. So he could never tell them anything. And he went to trial and was convicted. And then they went after Lundy for fraud because the statute of limitations had run out for them to prove that he had something to do with Alydar's death. They hired a guy named Pratt, who was an MIT engineer, and they tried to use his idea of how the horse was injured, and his report is on my website. But they were not able to persuade the judge that Lundy was the one who did it. And so that's why my investigation into the 25 other people was necessary to try to get information that was not information that either the FBI or the trials were able to find. Part of my book is also a courtroom drama because I take all those court cases and go through them and show you what the testimony was in those cases under oath, because that's important, and give the reader an idea of how complicated those trials were and how a lawyer would analyze the testimony and what was not said and what was not covered And the crazy thing that you think about when you look at these two trials is, the prosecution never had a theory of how Alydar intentionally injured his leg. When you look at the evidence and you read the book, you'll see that there's two camps. There's the camp of the doctors who are coming in after the accident, the incident, and declaring it an accident because there's a lot of pressure on horse racing. I mean, you're going to come in and say somebody killed Alydar for the insurance money. That's a bomb that they don't want to go off. I'm not saying that the doctors came in, Dr. Bramlage and Dr. Baker and Dr. Rhodes, and they were wanting to find an accident, and that's what they found. They did it in a way that they think made sense to them. But I go back to, you look at that stall door that night and you tell me that a horse who kicked it and broke his cannon bone, which can withstand 7,000 pounds of force and not leave a mark on that door, I don't believe it. And so the horsemen, the grooms, the people who are with horses every day, they all brought that up. And the grand jury brought it up. They said, where's the mark on the door? And Tom Dixon, who investigated, he doesn't deny there wasn't a mark on there. So you've got the doctor saying one thing, you've got the horseman saying another, and you've got lawyers who really were unable in Alton Stone's case to get someone that made sense about how he was intentionally injured. And that's what my investigation showed, how that could happen.
Well, I'm glad that you got to interview Tommy Burns. I don't know what you got from him, but as you may know, in 2021, Netflix had a documentary called Bad Sport, which was all about a horse killing scheme. Tommy Burns was your lead man in that. And from me, my wife and I both watched it. By the time it was over, I was in tears because looking at this man, he did wrong, but you knew he was sorry. And then he goes into stories about how certain things has happened to him over life and in health, and he feels like it's karma coming back for what he did. So I don't take up for any criminal, but when I looked at him, you could see in his eyes just that he was immensely sorry.
Well, let me tell you about Tommy Burns. I interviewed him, and I tell his story in the book. This is a guy who, left the house at 15, got involved in drugs and alcohol, and was mentored by a guy, Barney Ward. He's the one who would get the clients for Tommy Burns to kill the horses for. And what happened to him was, he was caught in Gainesville breaking a horse's leg with a crowbar. He didn't do it, but his Arlo did it. And so he turned state's evidence, and his karma was that when you saw it in the show, was to go and convict all these people. And he had to put up with the cross-examination of these lawyers about how he's a liar and how he did all these things. But he was the one who helped convict those people. And that, in his mind, that's his penance, And he wanted to protect what he considered to be his father, Barney Ward. So he didn't give him up to the FBI. And then the FBI came to him and sat him in a room and said, hey, I want you to hear this. And they played a tape where Barney Ward said, I'm going to take you out before you can talk. And I'm telling you that when we talked about that, he cried, sobbed deeply. And I could tell that this thing that Barney Ward did to him is a deep scar that hurts as much now as it did then. And I too had reservations about how I would feel about talking to him. And I say in the book, I spent the afternoon with him. He had 3 farm dogs. We had dogs all around us. He has horses. And it's funny because we heard a hoof kick while I was there, and he goes, now that's a hoof kick. You come away from him knowing that he feels bad for what he did, and he spent his life trying to make it right. And I'm not the only one he's a charismatic guy in the fact that he's telling you all arson, theft, all these things he did. And you're getting a glimpse into a criminal life from a safe spot that you would never get otherwise. I feel like he's done more good than he's done bad. And I'm not the only one. The FBI agent who was involved with his case picked him up at jail, and they're friends.
Yeah, because I watched it, with the Ward thing, I think at the end he was like, why am I protecting people that's not protecting me? And I'm sitting here, I'm just like yelling at the TV. I'm like, dude, just turn them in. They don't care about you. But yeah, I'll link that documentary too in the show notes, guys. You guys need to check it out because I think it goes hand in hand with your book. And now that you've interviewed him, people can get more of a glimpse of him than what we got from that documentary.
Yeah. Yep. He was a very interesting guy. I think he's smart. And we went over the evidence in this case, in Alydar's case. I said, look, you've done this. You did this for a living. Here's the stall door. Here's the bracket. Here's the layout. What do you think happened?
Now, the end part of your book says the end of horse racing's golden age. Can you tell us why you feel like that it was?
Well, it's funny because I'm not saying that the book title doesn't mean that Alydar's death was the end of horse racing's golden age. Horse racing's golden age was the 70s. And the reason that is because we had 3 Triple Crown winners. Secretariat, Seattle Slew, and Affirmed were 3 horses that won the Triple Crown in the 70s. That shows you what a great year that was. It was also a great decade. It was also a great decade because in the decade of the 70s when Alydar and Affirmed raced, they were racing when farms owned horses and trained horses. So Calumet owned Alydar. He was born on the farm. He was raised on the farm. He was trained on the farm, and he was raced by the farm. Same thing with Affirmed. Affirmed was owned by Lewis Wilson. He was owned by him, raced by him, and there was a much more personal relationship between the farm and the horse. Now farms will send their horse to Wayne Lucas, and there's no connection. It's just money changing hands. So many people think that was the golden age of horse racing because of that link and the difference in how horses were owned and trained. And as I've been on Twitter, which if you want to find me, that's where I am. I'm on there. That's my place at FM Kray. Some veterinarians have come on and said the reason the 70s are the golden age is because it was before Lasix was allowed and performance-enhancing drugs became used in horse racing. I didn't know that, but now that they've said that and they know what they're talking about, that's true. So the end of horse racing's golden age is in the title is really meant to say that the end of Alydar's racing career was the end of horse racing's golden age.
What is it that you want readers to take away from the book?
Well, first of all, I want readers to know it's a true crime book. It's not a horse book. It wasn't written in the parlance of horse racing. If you pick up this book and know nothing about horse racing, you will be really surprised at all the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on. But I don't talk about odds and betting and this horse has this much weight and all that. It's written in a style for lay people who know nothing about horse racing, can enjoy the mystery of what happened to Alydar, follow the FBI investigation, follow the courtroom drama, and then follow my investigation of all the people. And then at the end, they can decide for themselves what happened and fill out the verdict form on my website. The second thing that I wanted to come away with is that Alydar had a legacy other than being second to Affirm in the 1978 Triple Crown. That's what he's known for. You say Alydar, people say, he came in second to Affirm in 1978. He was a beautiful horse. He had a great personality. You'll hear some great behind-the-scenes things in the book about Alydar meeting the Queen of England, Alydar's friends, Alydar's quirks. He liked to watch TV. I mean, there's all these personal stories about him that were told by the grooms who lived with him, essentially. And you'll love Alydar when you're finished with this book because you'll get to know him in a way that's different than, any other way because you get to know the people that were around him and the horses that were with him. So, and the third thing is, the mystery's not entirely solved. And I believe there are people out there that know something. And I'm hoping that the publication of the book and, the people out there, I've already had people on my Twitter, come and say, hey, I would like to talk to you about this. And I'm open to talking to anybody. Or as a person, if you were at Calumet, I've had people say I worked at Calumet. I'd like to talk to you. I'm hoping that in 5 years that I can write, an ending about exactly what happened. And that's another reason that I wrote this book, was to shake some information out with people that are out there. And, the true crime community is known for that. You look at, some of the cases. I think the best one that's known is the Laura Patino case. The lady who was in a van, and they found the car. There was all kinds of things that social media was able to do. And there's nothing that can happen to anybody now. All the criminal statute of limitations is run, and it's just a question of And I'm still running up some important leads that I won't talk about now, and I'm not going to stop until I run out of things to look at.
In closing, is there anything you'd like to say to any of the readers and your fans out there?
Well, I would say that this book is unique in that, I guess it's repetitive, but it's unique in that you as a reader can take part in solving this mystery. It's written as a mystery. You'll see it, develop in time. You'll be able, when I say, hey, Tom Dixon took photographs, you'll be able to go on my website and look at those photographs and say to yourself, do I think that? Forget what Tom Dixon says. Forget what, Tommy Burns says. I can see how the stall is laid out. I can see all of the hardware of how the door is held in. Do I think that's something? Do I agree with that? You can see the statement of Alton Stone. You can see Dr. Pratt's report, and you can see, why did the insurance companies pay their money? You can see all the reports that were sent by Tom Dixon. So I don't know of any other book that does that. And again, you can go at the end. I've had people already fill out the verdict form, and you go on there, you get the code from the book, you get a verdict form just like you do in trial. When I was in trial, I'd get out the verdict form and say, hey, question number 1, you answer this. Question number 2, you answer this. And then you send it, and that's your verdict.
Well, Fred, I thank you for coming on the show. It has been enlightening. This is going to be one heck of a book. I'm getting my copy today as it is pub day. I did start reading your website, by the way, and I stopped because I wanted the book to go along with it because of what it was getting into. And that's what I'll say to the audience. Don't just go read his website. Get his book, then go to the website. Use those two as a companion.
Yeah, because the website, it's just cold evidence without really any context to it,
So, all right. So I thank you for coming on, man. Anytime you want to come back.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and, I hope we can talk again. And I hope that the true crime guys and your fans will take a look at the book. And it's, it's now out on Amazon, and, Amazon allows you to read like the preface in the first chapter. Read it. See if it doesn't interest you and fascinate you to want to know more.
Well, I thank you for coming on. Anytime you want to come back, you know how to get a hold of me. You're always welcome to come back.
I tweeted at you.
I saw that. All right, guys, that was the remarkable Fred M. Kray. You can get your copy of Broken, The Suspicious Death of Alydar and the End of Horse Racing's Golden Age right now on Amazon. By the time you hear this, it's already dropped because today, May 2nd, was published day for Fred. Also, make sure you go and visit his website, which will also be linked in the show note description. And anything else that you want to know about Fred will be attached. If you do have any knowledge of what happened to Alydar, his Twitter's right there. Be sure to reach out to him. He would love to talk to you about it. All right, guys, once again, thank you for tuning in. I know you have many choices in true crime podcasts, and I'm grateful that you are tuned in here. I hope you guys are being good and safe. And always remember, always stay humble. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And this is the podcast where two passions becomes one. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Authors. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. On Facebook at True Crime and Authors. On Twitter at Authors True. On YouTube and TikTok at True Crime and Authors. And email at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Dazzling_Ray from Fiverr. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild from Fiverr. And I'm the voice guy, your imaging guy from Fiverr. See you next time on True Crime and Authors.